informed and up to the point where we are in this situation. As State Attorney General, it's my responsibility to defend our state's laws, and that is something that I will continue to do. There's still a lot that we don't know about enforcement priorities from the Justice Department and how they plan to implement this new memo. I expect, based on what I have heard this morning, that the federal government is going to continue its focus on enforcement efforts and resources to combat the gray and black markets, diversion, and not target marijuana businesses that are abiding by our state laws and that are legitimate operators under Colorado law. The state of Colorado has worked diligently to implement the will of our citizens, and we have built a comprehensive regulatory and enforcement system that prioritizes public safety and public health. We know that there is still work to be done, but as a state, we have focused on strengthening recreational marijuana and enforcement of state laws, and I think that those priorities that have been laid out previously in the Department of Justice Cole memo, including the preventing of the distribution of marijuana to minors, the preventing of criminal enterprises and cartels from using our state laws as a cover or a pretext for illegal activity, and focusing on public health and prevention are still the critically important priorities for all of us in law enforcement to focus on. In the past, my office has worked very well with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Colorado on our enforcement priorities and just teamwork in this area. And I expect that that partnership is going to continue, that our open communication will continue. That has been confirmed in a conversation that I had on the telephone with U.S. Attorney Bob Troyer just about an hour ago, and we agreed that we will partner, we will keep each other informed, and that according to his statement that he issued this morning, he believes that the U.S. Attorney's Department, or office in Colorado, has been functioning according to the guidance that has been set out in General Sessions' memo this morning, and that we will not see a significant change in their enforcement priorities here in Colorado. One of the things that General Sessions' one-page memo does is remove the different guidance memos that we have seen issued during the Obama administration and that have been continued during this first year of the Trump administration. Those are pulled back and are no longer the guidance that is being provided. Instead, Attorney General Sessions is telling his U.S. attorneys to follow the historic guidance that they use as U.S. attorneys in the states and the jurisdictions that they represent, and continue to prioritize cases according to their local needs and priorities and enforcement capabilities. As I said, it leaves a lot for us open, and so we are working in partnership to fill in those gaps. I will be on a phone call later this afternoon with a working group that we have set up, a marijuana working group with the National Association of Attorneys General. There are several of us who are representing states that have legalized recreational and or medical marijuana, and we work on issues together to maintain consistency in our approaches. We are going to have a conversation later this afternoon to talk about how we go forward, whether there are any adjustments that we need to make in the work that we are doing. Ironically, I've just been working with a bipartisan group of state attorneys general in the last few days on a letter that we will be issuing regarding banking and the financial requirements at the federal level that continue to be a constraint on legal operators in Colorado. We're taking another attempt here to communicate to the Department of Justice and to Congress how important it is that businesses be able to bank their money and that we be able to practice business legitimately here in Colorado and the other states that have legalized marijuana. I will be happy to share a copy of that with everyone as soon as the ink is dry, but I think some revisions are taking place because of the news that we have heard this morning, and we want to make sure that we are up to date. That sort of cooperation among the state AGs and the state attorneys general and the U.S. attorneys will continue. And so I want to offer what reassurance I can to people here in Colorado who either voted for Amendment 64 or part of the legislative process, or the regulatory process interpreting that amendment, that this does not undo the hard work that people have done to protect public safety and public health here in Colorado. And I think we all have to take a deep breath and look at what the guidance is and let us have some conversations among law enforcement officials about priorities. But I do not see a major shift in Colorado in what has been happening in terms of regulation and enforcement on marijuana. I will say that there was no warning about this guidance. We had no idea it was coming, and like you, we woke up this morning to the news that there was new direction from Attorney General Sessions. I don't think the U.S. Attorney's Office knew that it was coming either. And it is unfortunate that the people who are on the ground working with marijuana enforcement issues every day, like the Attorney General's Office in Colorado, like the United States Attorney in Colorado, were not consulted before this guidance was issued, because I think we definitely could have shed some light on that. We have independently worked in the last year with the U.S. Department of Justice to proactively give input, sometimes without being asked, often without being asked, on what's happening in Colorado. Our data that we have about marijuana legalization regarding crime and criminal enforcement and the trends that we have seen thus far, I hope that that was taken into consideration in the decision that the Department of Justice made. I was actually at the National Association of Attorneys General meeting last March, where General Sessions compared marijuana to heroin and said that they were equally evil drugs and having consequences for our society and for our states. And I would just say that I disagree. I have watched the opioid epidemic unfold in Colorado and the great tragedies that we have seen in Colorado families as people have died from overdoses and worked hard to overcome addiction. It is very different from what I have seen regarding legalized recreational and medical marijuana in this state and the responsible approach that has been taken by the majority of operators. And so I want to emphasize that my perception differs from Attorney General Sessions, and I think that you will see and continue to see our priorities and our focus and our conversation here in Colorado focused on the areas that are most concerning, most troubling and dangerous to public safety in Colorado, and not to those things that are working and working well. I am happy now to take questions.
What do you see as the biggest impact?
Is it too simplistic at this point for the people in the industry to say everything is going to stay status quo for a little bit? What would you say to the retailers?
I don't want to overpromise when all we have is about 3 paragraphs on a piece of paper from the U.S. Attorney General, and we haven't seen any interpretation of that. But I am going to make a leap and tell you that I believe we will continue as a state to exert our right as a sovereign state to control what happens in our borders with regard to marijuana regulation and enforcement. So I can say that our approach and priorities are not going to change as a result of what we have heard today. The federal government has said, and I should say U.S. Attorney General Sessions has said, because I'm not sure this is a federal statement at all, but he has indicated that for him, marijuana is a drug like any other drug, and he, unless Congress acts in the void and changes the Controlled Substances Act and loosens the control on marijuana, he will go back to enforcing federal law in the way that he sees fit. He also has given his U.S. attorneys at the state level the ability to decide their own priorities. That is very significant. It is very significant in Colorado because it's saying, although this may be the position in Washington, you are entitled as U.S. attorneys in your jurisdiction to make decisions about your priorities.
Are you prepared to sue the Trump administration if, for instance, they would walk into what is at your disposal? What are you preparing to do in the case that they do raid a pot shop? Because I just left the dispensary and they said, we got to be open to the idea that might happen. What are you prepared to do as the AG of this state?
You know, I have always been prepared as Attorney General of Colorado to defend state law, and the citizens of the state of Colorado made it clear when they passed Amendment 64, and that became part of our state constitution, that this was what they wanted the law in Colorado to be. The legislature and the governor's office have carried that out very specifically and through statute, through regulation, and we have, in working with law enforcement, also made those same priorities ours. I don't see that changing. And if there is a situation where, as State Attorney General, I need to step up and say to the federal government in court that you've gone too far, you've overreached your authority, and you are now in our business in Colorado, I will certainly do that.
What do you see any impact for consumers other than the fact that they're going to hear about all this and kind of freak out a little bit because they don't know what to expect?
I don't. I would encourage people not to freak out, and you can quote me on that. Don't freak out because truly, I don't see sweeps coming. I don't see the Department of Justice changing its enforcement priorities. I have, in a letter to U.S. Attorney Bob Troyer, asked him to please notify us in the Attorney General's office if there is going to be any change in those priorities or in their actions so that we have a heads up. And I have his agreement that he will do that. I trust that, and I'm taking that to the bank. So I want people to know I don't think there is going to be a significant visible shift in how the marijuana industry or its customers do business.
Attorney General.
I'm sorry?
You caution calm.
Yes, I do.
Have you and Governor Hoover talked to each other about how you're responding to this today? Are you trying to get on the same page, or are you responding separately?
At this point, we're responding separately. We did a letter together last year, and much of what he has said in his statements and I have said in mine track the joint letter that we prepared for the Department of Justice, saying we're going to continue working and prioritizing public safety and public health in Colorado, and things are going just fine in Colorado.
Attorney General, you mentioned the idea of moving forward with banking for the pot industry. How does that not put more attention on Colorado and then say, come and get us, essentially?
You know, I think all of these things go hand in hand, or they're dominoes, if you will, that have yet to fall. So we have not, as a group of attorneys general who have put together this document and made this request regarding banking, had a chance to examine that in the light of the Sessions memo today. I think, in my mind, I want to go forward just as strongly as we have since Amendment 64 passed in saying, here in Colorado, we will determine our own destiny regarding legalized marijuana, recreational marijuana, and how we proceed. And federal government, if you don't want to see crime, if you don't want to see diversion, then you need to help us by changing the banking regulations so that legitimate business people can bank their money. And that won't change. I think we will continue to make those same statements and to vigorously pursue a change in federal law that will protect banking for the marijuana industry.
Have you ever told anyone in the industry, you're okay, you're never going to get shut down?
You know, I can't say that as the state attorney general, because the federal government is the one that is changing its statements and perhaps its focus. And all I can do is be consistent as state attorney general. I would never guarantee any business in the state of Colorado, because I don't know the circumstances, that they would never face legal action from our office, because that's a hollow guarantee, and I don't offer those. I don't think that is a constructive thing to do. What I can say is that we will be predictable in the actions that we take, and we are always open to communicating with people in the industry about that, and I am happy to have those conversations today and in the coming weeks, so that we can be sure that we offer sufficient reassurance under the law. Yes.
I just wanted to follow up on Joe's question. Does the state have legal remedies should the federal government prosecute a business here that the state believes is complying with all state-related laws and regulations related to recreational marijuana?
You know, we have had this conversation before, and what we have said is that if you're complying with Colorado law, we will stand with you. If the federal government takes action against your business, of course, we have to have some legal standing in order to do that, and it would depend on the specific factual scenario on what had happened, because I think the federal government would take action against a business, in this hypothetical, would take action against a business privately, and then we as a state would need to look for ways to either intervene or shore up the arguments that an individual business owner would make. But we would certainly be there to support a legitimate business owner and who's complying with the law.
Are there any other, I mean, would that be grounds for litigation, for trying to get a restraining order, for trying to get charges dismissed? Have you researched that, get a sense as to what the potpourri of options are in the state?
We have in the past. We haven't in the last few hours, having had our eye on other priorities, but we'll take another look to see the state can assert its rights as a sovereign state under the Supremacy Clause if the federal government comes in, and particularly because they have not acted in this realm before. I would argue that because they have taken the hands-off approach that they have, and they have focused on the priorities of the Cole Memo instead, that they have in many ways offered an argument to private business owners that they have detrimentally relied on the federal government, or not detrimentally relied, I'm sorry, they have relied potentially to their detriment by investing money, by building up businesses, by investing capital, by going out and finding people to participate in their business. They have established a commercial right, and I think we'll have a strong argument if the federal government then potentially tries to change the rules at this point and say, nope, we're going to come in and enforce. You know, we had these conversations before the 2016 election when we were all saying what will happen if an administration comes in that has different priorities and a different approach to marijuana than the prior administration. And we talked about the risk that businesses in Colorado have taken in reliance upon the federal administration. We knew that there could be a shift in how the Attorney General and or the President looked at marijuana and marijuana legalization. So I think what we are hearing and seeing today is that shift taking place, and now we all have to come back together, look at the situation and the enforcement issues with the Department of Justice, and say, what do we do now? What do we make changes? Do we need to make any adjustments? And how can our office, and this is my priority, the State Attorney General's office, work with the U.S. Attorney's office to assure that we are clear on what the federal government is going to do, that we communicate that to the citizens of Colorado, and that you are as informed and prepared for any changes as you can possibly be.
Attorney General, you said that this was a surprise to you. Sounds like it was a surprise to members of Congress. Do you have any sense as to why there wasn't a heads up given, why you were caught off guard this morning?
You know, I would just be, it would be conjecture for me to say why things were rolled out the way that they were. I surmise that there is not agreement within the Department of Justice in Washington about this, and perhaps some of the element of surprise as a result of the fact that there is not unanimity there in how to go forward. But I'm stepping now outside of probably an area where I should attempt to impute motive. Is that a good legal term? Yeah. It's like detrimental reliance, throwing them around. What else can I answer or take under advisement?
Anything you would advise businesses to do to strengthen their position at this point, or under the current law, or even potentially something new that might come up in this next session that could strengthen their business position, that risk that you talked about?
At this point, I would say no, continue doing business as you were doing it in compliance with state law, and seek guidance where necessary, just as you always have through the Department of Revenue and MED and local expertise. I think that our legislative director has been at the Capitol this morning and will continue to be monitoring potential activity coming during this legislative session. But there is nothing that we have heard about at this point in reaction to today's news.
So there isn't anything that you would need to tell the General Assembly that they need to be prepared to deal with at this point?
You know, at this point, I don't have a clear direction about that, and I think, of course, we are their attorneys, and we offer them advice, and they decide. We're not. I'm sorry. We are not their attorneys. Let me back up. We are not the legislature's attorneys. They have their own set of attorneys, but we offer guidance when we are asked, and we have those conversations about, obviously, about the law from our perspective, and we monitor, just as other agencies do, what the legislature considers its priorities, and we'll continue to do that, and we'll do our best to research and answer the questions that we are asked, because we want to be available to any lawmakers and law enforcement, as we always try to be. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.